Okay, let's go back. Can everybody see my screen?
Yep.
Perfect. So yeah, thank you all for having me. My name is April Biagioni, and like Asia said, I'm a community clinical manager with a Black-owned healthcare consulting firm out of Princeton. And I've been doing public health and education for the last 15 years. And it's our, desire to just give more information to community partners. If at any point someone's ever interested in pursuing clinical research and participating in clinical trials. So before we get started, if y'all don't mind doing this quick pre-program survey for me, it doesn't collect any of your personal information. It just helps me kind of see how I'm doing and how I present this information in a way that better informs our community. So if you have a QR code on your phone or a scanner, if you don't mind just opening this up, I would greatly appreciate it. And while you're doing that, I want this whole thing to be very interactive. So, during the duration of this presentation, please feel free to come off of mute and, stop me at any time if you have questions or you want to give me feedback. I might have some prompts, just to get some community engagement. So I want this to be, interactive and fun for everybody in participation. And also, just so I tend to like people know why I do this work. And so for me, it's one, I want to leave this community better than I found it. I have a son who's neurodiverse, and he participated in a clinical trial this past fall because they wanted to see how a COVID vaccine worked on someone who was on multiple medications for multiple diagnoses. So he's autistic, he's ADHD, and he has some anxiety. And so they wanted to see how this COVID vaccine would interact, with the medications that he was on. So I found it invaluable because they were looking for people who are neurodiverse. And when we say research needs to include everyone, we really mean everyone. So thank you guys for filling out that survey. I greatly appreciate it. So first of all, what is a clinical trial? The medical response that we sometimes get is yes, past medical research definitely had some unethical things that have happened. But when I say, medical research, what does that term mean to anyone in the audience? Does anyone want to come off mute? And I'm sorry, I cannot see anyone, so.
I'll watch the chat and the screen.
Oh, thank you so much.
I don't see anybody yet coming off of me.
Okay, so anyway, so what is a clinical trial? So when we say the words medical research, research study, clinical trial, and clinical study, all these terms generally mean the same thing, right? And, clinical trials are significant because they're the only way for researchers to find out if potential new treatments works and is safe. So, we also want to honor, some past unethical things that have happened with research, especially in vulnerable communities, and let people know that, yes, we have learned a lot from like Tuskegee or Henrietta, right? And so because of those unethical things, we now have a lot more rules and protections to make research safer for everyone to participate. Through, Tuskegee, after those 40 years, we now have what's called an institutional review board, right? So our IRB, to make sure that things are more ethical. We also have commitments from our drug makers and input from diverse community members who look like what these research participants are in that pool. Any questions? So some key players in the process of medical research includes one, the sponsor. So that's the one who's usually funding the study. We have the regulatory agencies like the FDA, the Federal Drug Administration. Europe has one very similar. It's called the EMA. It's the European Medicines Agency. And there's also, I think it's interesting because a lot of people, when we say clinical trials or we talk about research, we typically think about, therapies, immunizations, vaccines. but also I want people to understand that, if you've ever had, a knee replacement surgery or a hip replacement, those medical devices go through the same rigorous process as any drug that's coming to market. So, and that when we have this, the PMDA, so that's the Pharmaceuticals and Medical Device Agency, and they're out of Japan. So we also have, your study team. That's usually your nurses and your doctors and the people that you would be interacting with the most. Like I mentioned, you have the IRB, with the Institutional Review Board. So they kind of just make sure everything is ethical and going according to plan. And then you have your Community Advisory Board. And so those are people who have similar cultural backgrounds in which the study takes place and represent the community. So, this graph on the left shows the percentage of the average participation of ethnic groups who make up the participant pool of clinical research. And the graph on the right shows the percentage of ethnic groups that make up the US Census. So I'm curious if anyone wants to come off mute and just maybe say, what do you notice between the two graphs? So one thing that I noticed the first time I looked at this graph was that it's not even, right? So even though the US Census is only made up of 60% of white people, we make up 75% of the research. Also, you can see here, American Indians aren't even represented in clinical trials. And why is that important, right? So not all medications and therapies are tailored for everyone, right? So they might not work the same. Same thing if you are neurodiverse, medications might work differently on you. So that's why we need to make sure that we really close this gap and make sure that, yes, we've come a long ways, with diversity, but we have a lot more improvement to make. So thank you guys, because opportunities like this leads to better access, which will hopefully ensure that participants actually reflect the populations intended to use these medicines. Okay, so as a potential participant in a clinical trial, it's helpful to understand the basics of this process. So typically there are 4 phases to ensure it's safe and efficacy. But to learn whether the prescription drugs you or your loved ones may be taking are safe, it can take years prior to phase 1, in the lab, before it even gets tested on a small group of healthy volunteers, which is during phase 1. So something that I learned from this, is, if we did the job the right way from the very beginning, we would never need to get to a phase 4 of clinical trials. So phase 4 clinical trials are usually some of the medications that are already out there on the market today. And we're getting more information because we need to make sure that it's reaching a broad enough audience so that we can figure out, is it working the same on everyone? Can it be better? What are the side effects? So, but if we had a diverse population pool early on, we could get drugs to the market faster and safer. Any questions on that? Okay. So something else is, if you ever did decide to, go through a study, you would go through with something called the informed consent. And reading through the consent allowed me, when I was, thinking about this for my son, just become more at ease of what my son would be receiving as a participant in this clinical trial. And this is really a time for you to take your time, ask all the right questions, to decide if a clinical trial is right for you or your loved one. And with that said, I always tell people, like, take your best friend, a parent, someone that you trust in your family, maybe someone that's more outspoken than you are and isn't afraid to really ask a lot of hard questions, because this is really your opportunity to, get all the ifs, whats, ands, and what can I expect, So really take your time during the informed consent process. So if you do decide to move on, you would go through something that's called a screening. So in order to know if my son was eligible to participate in that COVID-19 vaccine trial, he was asked several questions about his background and his health. We did a physical exam. I think they took his weight, his height, and I believe they also collected a sample. So every research trial is different, but these are just some things that you could expect. And just getting screened, doesn't mean that you aren't right, but maybe you're not right now, right? So not everyone makes it through the screening process and gets accepted into clinical trials, but also knowing that these screening process should never cost you any money whatsoever. So there are various study designs in a trial, but the type that we participated in was called blinding. So neither my son nor I or the study team knew which treatment group he was in. So he didn't know if he was actually receiving the COVID-19 vaccine or not. And so that's one of the things that we asked a lot of questions during the informed consent process, because we had to take into consideration, well, what if he gets the placebo and doesn't actually get the vaccine? What are his health risks, right, if he does contract COVID-19 because he didn't actually get the vaccine this year? And so for us, we made the decision, he's healthy, he's young. If he happens to get it, he's probably not going to be, too bad off. But these are kinds of the things and questions that you want to think through before you do participate. So you will also, be maybe asked to do some home activities or to do follow-up study visits. Again, none of this should cost any money to you whatsoever. My son's home activity was maintaining a little health diary on his phone. So he thought that was really neat, and he got incentives for doing it. But they just wanted to see, was he red? Did he have swelling? Did he have a fever? Go ahead,
Hey,
Scott. Hi.
you interested? I said, are y'all planning to do anything for the youth during the World Cup? Or are you interested in collaborating on the summer camp? I could further discuss if you're interested. He said, definitely, let's talk. I
Oh,
love
okay. I think she may have been not on
That's
mute. Sorry
okay.
about that.
Yes, I love it though. Health education for everybody, and we should start it at a young age. So
April, I did have a quick question.
yeah, go ahead.
So,
I'll come back.
because when clinical trials are blind, and let's say it's for, I don't know, like a diabetes
Uh-huh.
medication, are you required, how do they manage that? Like you're currently prescribed medications. Like if I'm
Yeah.
currently prescribed something, how do you keep taking it or do you not take it? I've always been curious about how you manage your condition while you're going through a clinical trial.
Yeah, that's a brilliant question, and thank you. And it's something that I've learned just doing this work. So you will always receive your standard of care. So if you're already on blood pressure medication, but you're wanting to see, maybe you don't like the side effects of it, right? And maybe there's a new one that's on the market, and so you want to join that clinical trial to see maybe if you get this new, medication, it makes you feel better. Regardless, you will always get the medication that you were already on, right? So that's what we call the standard of care. So no one's going to take you off of any blood pressure medicine to put you in a blinding study. You just won't know if you're going to be receiving the same medication that you're getting now, or if you're going to be getting this new innovative medication that's being studied. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. Mhm.
Yeah, no, the same thing I want to say, I have a friend, unfortunately had stage 4 pancreatic cancer. And, he had gone through some novel approaches and tried some medications and therapies. But in this instance, because it was such a aggressive forming cancer, he just wanted to make it to the surgery day, right? He just wanted a little bit more time just to see if he could make it to getting to surgery. And so he was asked to participate in a clinical trial, and his wasn't blinded, right? And they're like, hey, we're going to take you off the medication you're on now if you want to try this new novel medication that's just now hitting the market. And so that was an opportunity for him and his family to try something novel and new. But it was worth the risk to him because he had tried everything else, right? And so he actually you know, luckily that extended him 6 or 7 months. And he was able to get, you know, to his surgery date, which was huge to him. And without participating in the clinical trial, he would have never had access to that new novel medication. And so I just sometimes want to throw out like that perspective too. So not all trials are blinded, but you know, it just depends on what the research study is. So always ask. Thank you. So people who participate in clinical trials, they come from all walks of life. And should you ever decide to participate, please inquire to know whether there are any resources that can help you or your clients, your patients, to see if there's anything that can help with offsetting transportation, parking, maybe get compensated for your time or reimbursed for time, travel costs. Also make sure that it's, you know, works for you and your schedule, right? So ask if there's telehealth appointments and follow-ups, if they have that kind of flexibility allowed. And also voice your concern if you want to participate. So a lot of people also don't feel empowered to ask their physician if maybe they would be eligible for any clinical trials. So I always encourage people, if you're interested and, you know, you see something, you get a Facebook message about, you know, something coming up in your neighborhood and they're looking for, you know, participants, talk to your healthcare provider, ask your physician, like, hey, you know, I saw this ad came up, you know, do you think I would be, you know, a good participant or eligible for this? What are your thoughts? So always talk to your healthcare provider too. Participating in a clinical trial is definitely truly your choice. And at any point you can opt out. So it's your choice to listen to the information that's provided. It's your choice to whether or not you're going to sign the informed consent form and join the study. It's your decision if you're going to take the treatment, or you can leave, right? So that's always up to you. And even though you might have received compensation, please don't let that stop you. If you are uncomfortable or you just want to stop and you don't want to continue, don't let those incentives like make you feel like, well, they gave me this, so therefore I need to do X, Y, and Z. If you are ever uncomfortable and want to leave, I just really want people to know that that's for you and that's your choice to make. So a few final thoughts. So, you know, your health and safety is the number one important thing for, you know, participating in clinical trials. People do it for various reasons. My son and I were really happy with his study participation. And for us, we were hoping that it would give more insight for, you know, how this vaccine works with people who had multiple diagnoses and who also take daily prescriptions. But also knowing that some of the stuff that we do here in the US can help people and families in other countries. And for us, you know, and the reason why I do this work is because I really want to close the health equity gap and ensure that everyone, you know, not just a few people, have access to therapies. So thank you all for being here and your willingness to learn a little bit more about research studies. I do have a post-program survey if you don't mind. Sorry, I should have grabbed these and put them in a link in here for you guys. But if you don't mind scanning this, it would be really great just to see if, you know, today's presentation helped inform you, maybe answered some questions that have been lingering, or maybe if you learned something new today, please let me know. And does anyone have any questions or want to share their experience?
Oh, April?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Can you speak to the reasons to why there are some differences in participation amongst the different racial ethnic groups?
Yeah, so thank you. That's one of the reasons, you know, why Johnson & Johnson is making a move and really trying to close these gaps. I think for a lot of communities, it was the historical and ethical things that have happened, you know, so, you know, that mistrust, and maybe also not having a health partner, like whether it's their primary care physician or someone that they can have those conversations with, to kind of work through some of those barriers and really understanding, you know, that a lot of safety parameters are now in place that weren't in place then. to try to close that health equity gap. I didn't understand until I was doing this work that I think it's like 83% of participants of clinical trials are not women, right? So it's the majority, it's 83% is men participate in clinical trials. So, it's not just, racial anymore that's like not part of these research studies, but also knowing that these medications aren't going to work the same on males and females, right? And so doing this work, I hope to just provide more education and awareness that, like, if we do want to close some of these health equity gaps, then we all need to be willing maybe to participate more.
Thank you.
I don't know if I answered your question or not, but if anybody else has a better response.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, you kind of mentioned it earlier, but, I think the Tuskegee, study, Henrietta Lacks, I think those two are, kind of prevalent in having impacted, participation from the African American Black community.
Yeah, for
Clinical
sure.
trials. But I'll share my experience with clinical trials. Some of you may know I have eczema, and so I've had it since I was 2 years old. And I used to live in Colorado, and there was a hospital system there called National Jewish, and they did a lot of clinical trials at that location. So I had the opportunity to participate in some of their clinical trials for some of the different eczema related drugs that you see nowadays. And so that was interesting, just kind of being a part of that and having to, not knowing whether or not you're getting the placebo or the real drug. And like you
Right.
said, having to monitor, like report on, did you take it? Did you use it regularly? Did you have any side effects, any burning, any reactions? And so, it was an interesting experience to be a part of a clinical trial. And then kind of see it come to market afterwards and kind of feel like you were a part of it. So
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you, Aisha, for sharing your story. Would you do it again? I guess would be my next question. Would you consider?
I would. I think for me, I'll be honest, I'm probably one of those
Yeah.
people who are a little hesitant depending on the type of clinical trial it is. I think there's some things that are less invasive than others and kind of feel a lot like have a low risk. So I think, it's I would be more willing to do it. But I certainly think, if there was a terminal illness or something like that, I'd be willing to sign up for anything that gives me the opportunity to, kind of buy some time. So,
Oh, well, thank you for sharing. I appreciate it. And thanks for letting me be here today to, share this presentation with you all.
thank you. And I know that I saw today we were fortunate to have some of our community health workers that work in research join. So just before we move to the next segment of today's meeting, just seeing if there's any other thoughts or questions from our research-based CHWs. And I do also see Adrian put a note in the chat. She said trials are often very time consuming to the participants. What are some of the measures you've implemented to help minimize attrition rates? Good question, Adrian.
Oh, that is a good question. I don't think I have an answer for that. I'm not actively recruiting for any trials, so I don't know about the retention rates and what people are doing for various ones across the city. But I think, having a platform and an organization like this is incredibly valuable to our communities. So I'm really happy to be here and learn from you guys and see how we can work together to do more education.
Aisha, you're muted.
Thank you so much. I was just saying thank you, April.
Yeah.